Syracuse is once again a heavy underdog this Saturday. Can they find a way to upset SMU? Let's talk about it.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer. Thank you for making us your first listen of every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We are always free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And on today's show, we are discussing all things Syracuse football and their next opponent, SMU. We'll go over the SMU defense against the Syracuse offense, the SMU offense versus the Syracuse defense. And of course, we'll begin by discussing what exactly has happened to SMU. We remember last year where they were in the college football playoff, but now they're sitting at 2-2 to start 2025. All that and more here on today's edition of Locked On Syracuse. And before we get to everything, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Syracuse football, I checked the latest FanDuel Sportsbook odds. Shout out to our friends over at FanDuel. And they have Syracuse as a, you ready for it? 16.5-point underdogs this Saturday at SMU. No, I am not exaggerating. No, I'm not making it up. No, I'm not sensationalizing it for clicks and views. Last time I checked, FanDuel Sportsbook, which was this morning, Tuesday, September 30th, Syracuse 16.5-point underdogs. Translation? People are not really giving Syracuse much of a chance this Saturday against SMU, and honestly, it's for good reason. From the Syracuse perspective, last week was terrible. 38-3 loss to Duke at home, and Steve Angeli is not coming back for the rest of the season. So until Ricky Collins and Syracuse football can prove otherwise, that they can still be a formidable team, they're not going to get a lot of respect from the sports books and from any national publications out there after what we just saw on Saturday against Duke. And from the SMU perspective, they're at home, and even despite their record being 2-2, they are a pretty decent team, and a team that I still believe is a sleeper to be in the ACC title game. That's right. I still think SMU can make it, because if you look at their two losses, they're not against ACC opponents. This will be SMU's first game against an ACC opponent in 2025. Plus, SMU is at home, and they've been a pretty good team the past couple of years. They are led by fourth-year head coach Rhett Lashley, who is one of the better coaches in all of college football. The last 2 years, SMU has won 11 total games in each season. Of course, we all remember SMU last year was playing in the ACC title game and went on to go to the college football playoff despite losing the title game to Clemson at the last second. Now, as far as SMU this year, because honestly, who cares about what they did in 2024? We care about what's going to happen potentially on Saturday against Syracuse. Things haven't exactly gone SMU's way. They are sitting at 2-2 right now, and it was sort of to be expected. Maybe not this soon by SMU, but regression was sort of expected by this SMU team. Yes, they retained their starting quarterback in Kevin Jennings, who we'll talk about more later on in the show. And they did make some nice portal additions as well, but they also lost a lot of talent that helped lead SMU to the conference title and the college football playoff a year ago. And then you combine that all up with the fact that natural regression was sort of coming. We all kind of saw this from SMU because last year they kind of punched above their weight to win 11 games. Combine everything together, and you get a team right now that is still pretty good, but they're 2-2. They did not look good in either of their wins against East Texas A&M or Missouri State. And in their losses, they blew a 14-point lead in the fourth quarter at home against Baylor. Inexcusable loss for SMU. And then a couple of weeks ago, they had a lead in the fourth quarter against a good TCU team, 24-21, and then they end up losing that game 35-24. So the line being 16.5, I think it's maybe a little bit more towards the fact that Syracuse at this point is just not getting really any respect from the national media or the sports books. And I get it after what we saw last week. It's also pretty similar to me how I think a lot of people looked at Clemson heading into that one versus Syracuse and how they weren't going to fall to 1-3. There was just no way, right? Well, lo and behold, they fell to 1-3. So with SMU, there's no way they're going to fall to 2-3, right? No chance. No chance. They're not going to fall to 2-3. Well, I guess we'll find out on Saturday, right? They are allowed to lose a game in Syracuse after all. Now, I mentioned a couple of weeks ago against TCU, SMU was coming off a bye. Now, we know Syracuse's struggles when coming off a bye. They predate Fran Brown, the head coach of Syracuse, but it also includes the Fran Brown era because we remember last year Syracuse coming off a bye lost both of its games. Under Rhett Lashlee, SMU, if my math is correct, looking back at when Rhett Lashlee took over as SMU head coach, they are 4-1 coming off a bye. And last year, they went 3-0 off a bye. And you might be asking me right now, hey, 3-0, how did they get 3 bye weeks last season? Glad you asked. They got 3 bye weeks because they played in week 0 in 2024. And here's a stat for you with SMU and coming off a bye. This goes back to last season, 2024. SMU outscored its opponents. You ready for it? 48-0 in the first quarter when coming off a bye. So if you're Syracuse, you better watch out because this is not the team under Rhett Lashlee that will sleepwalk in the first quarter or take a little bit to get going off a bye. Whatever they got going on over there and how they perform immediately after a bye. I mean, can SMU just, give that formula over to Syracuse? That would be nice because typically Syracuse does not do well when coming off a bye. It would be nice if, Syracuse after a bye or after the SMU game, they got a bye. And then against Pitt, they can go up 10-0 in the first quarter. That would be pretty cool. You're allowed to do that. But that's what SMU is with Rhett Lashlee. Don't expect them to be out of it in the first quarter. Like sometimes what can happen when a team comes off a bye. Be a little disjointed. Everyone's a little bit off their routine. Yeah, you're rested, but maybe that rest doesn't really help you until later on in the game. In the beginning, you might be out of your rhythm. That's not the case with SMU. What are your thoughts on this matchup between Syracuse and SMU? Comment your thoughts in the comments section below. And of course, give your prediction in the comments section below. Do you think Syracuse can actually upset SMU on Saturday, 16.5-point underdogs? I'd love your thoughts in the comments section below. Now, coming up, how can the Syracuse offense exploit the SMU defense? We'll talk about that next later on here on Locked On Syracuse. One of the tools that help make a big difference for business owners is Quo, formerly OpenPhone. It's the same great business phone system you've heard me talking about before, just with a new name. And here's why it matters. Every missed call is money left on the table. When every customer conversation counts, you need a phone system that keeps you connected 24/7. Quo is the #1 business phone system that streamlines customer communications. It works right through an app on your phone or computer, so no more carrying 2 phones or relying on a landline. Whether you're a solo operator juggling everything or part of a larger team, Quo makes it easy to stay responsive and professional. See why over 90,000 businesses trust Quo, formerly OpenPhone. Get started for free and get 20% off your first 6 months at quo.com/lockedoncollege. That's QUO.com/lockedoncollege. And if you've got existing numbers with another service, Quo will port them over at no extra charge. Quo, no missed calls, no missed customers. It was disappointing last week to see Syracuse football with their backup quarterback in Ricky Collins really struggle against a Duke Blue Devils defense, which up until last Saturday was not a very high ranked defense in the ACC. And I bring that up to let you all know that SMU, as of right now, through the first 4 games of their season, is not exactly an elite defense either. So this gives Syracuse's offense another chance and really an opportunity for this team to bounce back in general on offense. There's no real excuses anymore. None. Last week, you want to say, all right, Ricky Collins' first start. We all got to get, the growing pains out of Ricky Collins. I understand that. This week, now he's had another full week of preparation, another week of game tape, going over the tape with Fran Brown in his office following the loss to the Duke Blue Devils. This SMU defense is definitely gettable, and it's up to the offense to rise to the occasion, because we'll talk about it later on in the show. I really don't have a lot of faith in this defense against the SMU offense. Let's go over the SMU totals, all right? Some stats for you all, so you can actually believe what I am saying about this SMU defense, okay? Total points allowed per game, 26.5. That is 12th in the ACC. Total yards, nearly 450 allowed per game. That is 16th in the conference. They are only ahead of our beloved Syracuse Orange. And yes, we love our Syracuse football team, Syracuse fans, but they are currently dead last in the ACC in total yards. Thankfully, SMU is just above them at 450 total yards a game allowed. Rushing yards, about 115 a game. That's actually pretty highly ranked, 6th in the ACC. And they only give up about 3.2 yards a carry. That is 4th in the conference. Finally, passing yards allowed per game. You ready for it? SMU allows 334.5 yards per game through the air. That is last in the ACC. That's right. Through 4 games of SMU's season, doesn't mean it's going to hold up the rest of the way. They have the worst pass defense in the conference. So take a wild guess as to what I am going to say next about how Syracuse can exploit SMU. Take a wild guess. Oh, were you expecting me to say run the ball? No. Throw it. Throw the ball against this SMU defense. If they can't establish a passing game against SMU, I don't know what to tell you about Syracuse for the rest of the year. I really don't. I think it's very likely we go into this game and yes, Syracuse may lose the game, but if at least they can get their passing game going, we may have hope for the rest of the season. We might. At least they can show a pulse against an ACC team. But if they can't get going against an SMU defense that is last in pass yards allowed per game, I don't think they're going to make a bowl in 2025. I'm sorry, because then I don't know how they're going to be able to pass the ball against the other teams that they're facing later on in the season that are much better at stopping the pass versus a team like SMU. And it's weird that SMU has struggled against the pass this year because they're good at stopping the run. And usually if a defense can stop the run, that helps their pass defense significantly. Why? Because when you can stop the run on defense, that means you don't have to put as many players in the box. You can have more players in the secondary. And as a result of having more players in the secondary, guess what? Theoretically, your passing defense should be a lot better. For whatever reason, that is just not the case for SMU. This is the type of game where I'm expecting Syracuse's wide receivers. They're good ones, right? Jonte Cook, Justice Ross Simmons. We saw Emmanuel Ross a little bit against Duke. Get open, especially when they're facing one-on-one coverage. Get open. That being said, this SMU defense, they are very opportunistic. That I will certainly give SMU because they have forced, my math serves correct, 9 turnovers in 4 games. 9 turnovers. That includes 6 interceptions and 2 pick sixes right there. So SMU is the type of defense that I think Syracuse, assuming they can get decent quarterback play from Ricky Collins, they should be able to move the ball against this SMU defense. They shouldn't really have much of an issue. But it can change on a dime. It's one of those games where Syracuse could have 450 total yards of offense, be moving up and down the field, but they don't score a lot of points. And we're all asking, how come they didn't score a lot of points? Well, it's because they turn the ball over a lot. And for what it's worth, last week, Syracuse, they had 3 turnovers against Duke. I'm going to let you in on a little secret right now because coming up, we're going to talk about the Syracuse defense against this SMU offense. If Syracuse turns the ball over 3 times, their odds of winning are 0. 0. They have no chance. None. I mean, comment your thoughts in the comment section below. Agree with me? Disagree with me? You think Syracuse can win with turning the ball over 3 times on the road? 16.5-point underdogs? I don't think so. So SMU, very, very opportunistic defense, but it is a defense that will surrender yards, particularly through the air. And if you're Syracuse, at minimum, can you at least show a pulse in the passing game despite having a backup quarterback, because your starting quarterback is not coming back for the rest of this season? I hope they do. Comment your thoughts in the comments section below. How many points do you think Syracuse is going to score on offense this Saturday? Very curious. Last week, they only scored 3 against Duke. Do they at least get a touchdown this week? That would be nice. That would be a good start. They didn't get one last week. First time in the Fran Brown era, no touchdowns. Can they at least get 1 against SMU? Maybe 2? How about 3? Am I asking too much for 4? Comment your thoughts in the comment section below. Now coming up, how the Syracuse defense matches up against this SMU offense. We'll talk about it next on Locked On Syracuse. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if it wins, you get $300 in bonus bets. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. My suggestion is to bet against the New York Jets. Okay? Bet against the New York Jets. That is rule number 1 of sports betting. You bet against the New York Jets. So you have that first $5 bet, put it on the team that the Jets are playing next. And as a Jets fan, I forgot who. Oh, they're playing the Dallas Cowboys at home. Never mind. Doesn't it sound like a game that Dallas might just choke away on the road in MetLife Stadium with that MetLife turf? Oh, goodness gracious, they might. See, this is the delusional Jets fan in me talking. But anyways, what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. Can this Syracuse defense rebound from last week's disastrous performance against the Duke Blue Devils? Can defensive coordinator Elijah Robinson prove that he is the right DC for Syracuse football, not just for the rest of 2025, but moving forward 2026 and beyond that? Because guess what, folks? A lot of people are on board with the idea of letting him go. Some of you might think that he should be let go as soon as possible. I don't really see the point in that. I think you should wait until the end of the season. But regardless, this keeps up with this defense. He's on the hot seat right now. Let's just say that. I do wonder if Fran Brown will fire him because they have that relationship. That's neither here nor there. Regardless, can this defense step up against SMU? Because this is a nice test. This is an offense that is pretty decent in the ACC. They haven't gotten off to the greatest start, but they are still very capable of putting up a lot of yards and, most importantly, putting up a lot of points. Their quarterback is Kevin Jennings. Kevin Jennings was their starting quarterback for most of last year. All ACC caliber quarterback, definitely, despite not having the greatest start in the world to this year, is an upper half quarterback in the conference. The only real issue right now with Kevin Jennings is that he turns the ball over a lot. He's got 5 interceptions in 4 games, but otherwise, you look at his completion percentage, you look at his touchdowns, you look at his yards, you look at the fact that he's incredibly mobile, even if it doesn't necessarily show on the stat sheet with his rushing yards. He is a mobile quarterback. He does like to use his legs and roll outside the pocket. He's a very, very good quarterback. It's just the fact that he's thrown one too many interceptions through the first 4 games of this season. Syracuse, for what it's worth, they have 3 interceptions on defense this year. So can they get their hands on a couple of Kevin Jennings passes? Hopefully they can, because that could be the difference in the game on Saturday. As far as totals for this SMU offense, they are averaging about 35 points per game. That is 9th in the conference. Averaging over 420 total yards a game. That's also 8th in the ACC, rushing yards per game. 141, 9th in the conference. Passing yards, 282. That is 6th in the ACC. So pretty much in every category, they're upper half, but they're not elite in any particular category on offense. They're also an incredibly balanced offense. You go check College Reference right now. SMU, on average, they run slightly more than they pass the football. So if you're Syracuse, here's what you really need to look out for, okay? They run a lot of zone read type of plays. I already mentioned the fact that Kevin Jennings likes to roll outside the pocket. So outside contain is going to be very, very important on Kevin Jennings. Keep him in the pocket, force him to make throws in the pocket. Yes, he can certainly make throws, but if he's using his legs and scrambling outside, that's where he's probably most dangerous. It's a pick your poison type deal with a guy like Kevin Jennings. And eye discipline is going to be incredibly important for Syracuse football. I already mentioned the zone reads that they like to run. Well, you don't necessarily know who's getting the ball on any particular play. They could have a wide receiver going in motion. It looks like it could be an end around, but no, it's a handoff. But no, it's actually Kevin Jennings keeping the football. Point is, you don't really know. So eye discipline, very, very important for this Syracuse defense. And of course, hopefully when they're in position, they can actually make a tackle, right? That tackling thing, missed tackles are sometimes a bugaboo with Syracuse football, of course. Now, the rushing defense for Syracuse football. Can they stop the run against SMU? They're going to have a hard time in all likelihood. I would love to see them step up. I mentioned it on yesterday's show. I would love to be wrong about this Syracuse football defensive line. SMU, they had a terrific running back last year who's now in the NFL by the name of Brashard Smith. I think he's on the Kansas City Chiefs, but you can fact check me there if I'm wrong. They replaced him with TJ Harden, who looks terrific. Big guy, 6'2", 220 pounds. He's got 57 carries, over 300 rushing yards this season, 5 rushing touchdowns, over 5.4 yards per carry. Big physical runner, kind of like Syracuse's very own Yasin Willis. Behind him, you got Chris Johnson Jr. That's right, he is the son of former NFL running back Chris Johnson, CJ2K. If you had him in fantasy that year, congratulations on your fantasy football championship. Hopefully it's not your only fantasy football championship. Side note, I began playing fantasy football probably the year after Chris Johnson had his 2,000-yard season, because I remember the first draft I ever participated in, Chris Johnson went first overall. And I think that was really the only year where Chris Johnson went first overall, which was the year after he ran for 2,000 yards. Shout out back in the day when it was Chris Johnson and Adrian Peterson as the top running backs in fantasy football. But anyway, Chris Johnson Jr. for SMU. Sorry to go off on a little tangent there about fantasy football. He's kind of like his father. I mean, he's not as good as his father, don't get me wrong, but he's kind of like him. He's incredibly fast. He's not the biggest dude in the world, 6 foot, 184 pounds, but he's averaging 5.7 yards per carry this season. So they got a little bit of thunder with a guy like TJ Harden, and they got a little bit of lightning with Chris Johnson Jr. So overall, when you look at SMU, they may not have the same magic that they had a year ago. Currently sitting at 2-2, and I think their at-large bid for college football playoff is pretty much over. Unless they completely run the table the rest of the regular season, it's pretty much over. They're not going to make it at large at 2-2 right now. But they don't have a conference loss, just like they don't have a conference win. So I still think this is a very formidable team. I still think that this is easily an SMU team that will make a bowl in 2025. That's at minimum they'll make a bowl. And I would not be shocked if SMU found itself in the ACC title game this season. I would not be surprised at all because last year, you think back to SMU, they had an early season loss. It was to BYU. And for the entire regular season, I think myself and many of you looked at SMU as that team, they'll eventually slip up. They'll eventually slip up. And they just didn't slip up until the conference title game. Could that be the case this season? Could their rally really begin this Saturday against Syracuse? Hopefully not. Hopefully not. Syracuse fans, Syracuse alum, many of you are Syracuse fans and Syracuse alums that are watching and listening to Locked On Syracuse right now. We hope that Syracuse can win. It's going to be a tough task beating this SMU team on the road. Now, as far as what's coming up on this podcast here in the near future, tomorrow, or maybe later tonight, I don't know, but I'm recording this very soon. It is a crossover edition podcast with the host of Locked On SMU, Grayson Singleton. So that's coming up as the next podcast on Thursday. 3 keys for Syracuse to upset SMU. We'll discuss that on Thursday, of course. And also an announcement for you all, ladies and gentlemen. So on Locked On ACC a couple of weeks ago, I did a solo show. If you recall, that was before Syracuse, I believe, played Colgate on that Friday. And it was when Georgia Tech had, at the time, upset Clemson. It was the Friday right before that game. I hosted a solo show on Locked On ACC. And guess what, folks? From now on, I will be hosting a solo show every Friday on Locked On ACC. So if you want to hear more from me, be sure to check out Locked On ACC every Friday. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button for that channel. And of course, you can catch me on Fridays over there. Thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all so much for listening. If you like this podcast, be sure to hit that like button. If you really enjoy the podcast, be sure to hit subscribe. Tell all your friends about Locked On Syracuse, and I'll see you all again soon.